In personal relationship, let's say someone is shouting at you and you do not say anything. So it's easy for others to lose respect for you if you are agreeing to be treated this way, but also it's easy to lose respect for yourself, and with that, the self-esteem is decreasing.
Welcome to the Volunteer Support Podcast, brought to you by the European Union's co-funded project Promptus.edu, a collaboration between associations Audis Out Mori and Building Bridges. Hello everyone, this is the Volunteer Support Podcast, and today with you are Audis Out Mori team, me Tadas and Gabriela.
Hi.
So today we have a topic about the importance of setting boundaries for your emotional well-being. It's a very interesting topic and it's very important for everyone to be able to set boundaries. In our fast-paced world, it's easy to feel pulled in a million directions. And boundaries are invisible lines we draw to protect our emotional well-being. They define how much we give of ourselves to other people, and boundaries create a safe space for us to thrive. It's about our emotional well-being and it's about feeling as best as you can. And boundaries are psychological limits that mark the distinctions between who we are and who we are not, what causes us emotional harm and what does not. Boundaries are an expression of knowing and affirming our needs, desires, thoughts, and feelings.
I completely agree. And maybe to make it even more simple, it could be just like your inner compass that says yes or no. That basically you're setting a standard. How do you want to be treated in the world? What is okay for you? What is not okay for you?
Yeah. So still for introduction, let's think if you have in your environment a person who is like a human sponge, soaking up everyone's worries. That person may be happy 1 minute and drained the next, taking a lot of feelings like hearing everyone. And there should be a mental raincoat. We should support others without getting soaked. So that's boundaries. We may do that. So what are the benefits that boundaries may have? We may have reduced stress, because it's much clearer for us and also for others actually if we are setting clear boundaries. It is about saying, I will do this if you will do that. It's not about saying that, oh, you can't say that. No, you can't control that. So it's not the boundary that you should set, because in a way, if you will say it, you will feel that you don't have control of that. So usually set boundaries with your action, the things that you can control. So it can have effect of improved relationships, because if people are setting boundaries, they understand each other better and they are happier because they are not hiding something. Increased self-esteem. You can have control in your life more. A sense of emotional safety. You're not letting other people use you. You're not letting other people harm your emotional state. Better prioritization of your mental health. In general, yeah, it's about health, so you're giving more to your health. More time for yourself and your loved ones, improved focus and productivity, stronger sense of identity, less resentment and anger, and healthier work-life balance.
I do agree with what you mentioned. I would like to explore a little bit more how can setting boundaries increase self-esteem and confidence. As you mentioned, there are some people, maybe we recognize us in those people that are like sponges, that has difficulties setting boundaries. Maybe they do not know how to say no in the workplace. Then more and more people are putting work on them, and then they become overworked. And then they think that they cannot do the work, and through that, the self-esteem can decrease. But even in personal relationship, let's say someone is shouting at you and you do not say anything. So it's easy for others to lose respect for you if you are agreeing to be treated this way, but also it's easy to lose respect for yourself, and with that, the self-esteem is decreasing. Also, you mentioned that putting boundaries can make your relationship healthier and better. And I realized that it can be difficult to understand because, oh, you're putting boundaries in between me and you. We don't want someone to get angry with us. But what helps for me to understand why it could be helpful or beneficial for the relationship is when I'm not putting boundaries and someone crosses them overly, I become resentful, I become bitter, or maybe even angry. And not necessarily I'm showing this, but it's really hard to be genuinely loving, genuinely caring, empathetic when you are feeling hurt or bitter or resentful. After you putting these boundaries, you can have this capacity to be friendly, caring, listening, and so on.
And saying yes is not always love, and saying no is not always harm. So we may say hard no, and that's because we love that person. It's just healthier to, in that situation, to not do that, to not go that way, and so on. It may be like, probably everyone knows the example about social media. So it's not healthy. So no, don't use it anymore. Like, it's too much. Let's go outside. Let's talk, and so on.
I would even come back to the relationship part because I feel like it's still not covered. How can boundaries be a thing to make your relationship better? Brené Brown, the psychologist, the psychotherapist, that she's quite famous now, she did a study and she was studying people who were like really loving and caring, and other people were saying that about them. And she realized that these people had the strongest boundaries. And only when you are feeling well with yourself, then you can carry out for others. And I think it's reasonable that setting the boundary at the beginning could be a little bit hard. Let's say someone asks you to do something, but you already know that you will not have time to do that. And the example of the headmaster asked her to do the cookies for some kind of party. And she felt like in herself, oh, I don't want to say no to her because she's a headmaster. I should do that. But at that moment, she was able to say, no, I do not have time dedicated for that. It was on too short notice. And she realized that in that way, she could be a better mom because she could spend time with her children and so on. Instead, what if she would say, yes, I will do them? And the whole evening, she would be like, oh, angrily, oh, I have to do this cooking and so on. So it's not making the relationship better with the family or with the headmaster. For the short term, it might be easier to say yes, but you'll have to do this work that you had promised and maybe feel angry about yourself for that. So for long term, it is better for everyone to set boundaries.
Let's continue on common boundary issues. As we talked a bit before, it's quite difficult to say no. People are feeling obligated to say yes to request even when it overextends them. So we should practice assertiveness. Use I statements to express your needs directly but politely. Then quite a common issue is about feeling guilty and experiencing guilt for setting boundaries or prioritizing your needs. So it's very important to identify your values and align your boundaries to your values. And then you can explain that this is my value and this is very important to me. Then quite often we have unclear communication. So not clearly communicating your boundary to others is a problem. And just communication skills, practicing can really help to express your needs and expectations in a direct manner. So it's very important to learn, communicate clearly, and express our needs in as much clear way as possible. Then it's quite hard to follow through this set boundary. We may be motivated by some podcast or video about boundaries, and then we may set them, but to continue keeping it through may be hard. We should think about our values, and if that boundary is really based on our value, just stick to it and explain that it's very important to me because my emotional well-being is connected with that. We may say that to the person, like a loved one, very close by. To some other people, we may not open up that much, but just say that it is very important. Also, we should recognize signs of disrespect and to pay attention to how other people behave and address our boundaries. And if there is too much for us, we should set another boundary. You may change your behavior, or you may not even communicate with that person anymore if he's doing this. One more important issue with setting boundaries is difficulty setting boundaries with family members. In this, it's very important to be patient, because changing family dynamics takes time and consistent communication. This is the relationship that you have for a long time, and people are used to that you are communicating in such way. And when you are changing your view, other people may not respond to that very quickly. So you have to focus on the I statement and express how their behavior affects you. And it should be very open, very assertive, and about you, how you feel. And if it takes quite long time to do it, you may even need some therapy help, like to discuss with psychologists, psychotherapists, how they can help for you to change the relationships that you have. That's it with common boundaries issues. Let's talk about types of boundaries. There are physical boundaries. So these boundaries define your physical space and privacy. So it's about personal space. And if someone is touching you and that person is unknown to you, for some person, it's a stepping over boundary. For some, it's not. So if you're uncomfortable, you can just extend your arm or just say it politely that please don't touch me. Another example could be physical boundaries at home. So you can set at that place, please don't interrupt me because I'm working or I'm doing some other activity, even like I am enjoying my free time. So just set boundary like that. Would you like to add anything about physical boundaries, Gabriela?
I remember the person in my high school that she was really expressive with her arms and were likely to touch people. When she's talking, she would grab their hands and be shaking, I want to tell you something, and so on. But at least in my culture in Lithuania, it's still uncommon. And when we speak about putting boundaries and relationships, so I think it would be better to just tell her and put this feedback on her that I don't feel comfortable when you touch so much, rather than avoiding her, not helping with her homework and so on, just avoiding altogether.
Next type of boundary is emotional boundary. Emotional boundaries establish limits on how much emotional energy we give to others. It involves protecting yourself from negativity and emotional manipulation. We can limit our exposure to negativity by taking breaks from social media or gossiping people. Then we have mental boundaries. So these boundaries protect our mental space and time. This includes setting limits on work hours, information overload, and mental stimulation. You can set work boundaries by checking emails only during work hours and not responding after hours or in the weekend. Then we have material boundaries. So these boundaries involve setting limits on our possessions and finances. This includes saying no to lending money or being pressured into unwanted gifts. We can politely decline requests to borrow money if it makes us uncomfortable. We can set a budget for gifts and avoid feeling pressured to overspend it. So it can be like a year budget. We can communicate our needs regarding shared possessions and avoid others taking them without our permission. And then we have communication boundaries. So these boundaries establish how we prefer to communicate and what is acceptable. It involves setting limits on interrupting, respecting your privacy, and avoiding gossiping. So we can let others know that we prefer not to be interrupted while working. Or we can ask people to text or email us instead of non-urgent calling and disrupting our work. We can say directly about gossiping and refuse to participate in conversations that disrespects others. And we can be sure that someone will try to step up for that boundary that we are setting, because it may be uncomfortable for some people. at least in the beginning. So what is important is to stay calm and assertive, to use the statements with I and express our feelings, how we feel about that, and try to avoid getting defensive or emotional. Then we should explain the reasons behind our boundary. So help the other people understand why it's important to us, explain the values behind it. Then we should acknowledge other people's feelings, validate their disappointment, but don't feel obligated to change mind. We can offer alternatives. If possible, suggest a compromise that respects both of your needs, and we should prepare for consequences. Decide what will happen if they continue to push back. This could involve limiting contact or ending the interaction altogether. Remember, setting boundaries is about self-respect and protecting your well-being. It's okay if others don't like it, and it may take time for them to adjust.
It's very interesting to see this prejudiceness about boundaries and how people react in real time when they have to put these boundaries. One example that I remembered that someone might say, oh, I don't want to be called names or shouted, but then they are struggling to say at least something to that person. For us, it's a boundary that we don't allow volunteers to go out with people who are calling. There was a guy who asked for the number of volunteer and she said, no, sorry, I have to hang up. Do we push away and run away completely, or do we not do anything? I think relationships is about going with these boundaries. So let's say if you didn't even put those boundaries, you didn't say that, oh, I don't feel comfortable when you asking me out. And then later on, if this continues, you can say, if you continue to ask me out, I will have to hang up on you. And if still continues, then you say, I'm sorry, but you are not listening to me and you're still calling me out, so therefore I'm hanging this call. And I think in this way we can learn that first we have to say the boundary in a very clear, understandable way, what you are expecting, then say what you will do about it if it still continues. And when it actually continues, actually do the thing that you said you will do. And as Tadas mentioned, it has to be in your control, because it could be your boundary, oh, I don't want to be asked, but you cannot control the person who is asking whether and how he will react and so on. If you continue to talk to me like that, if you continue to ask me out, if you continue to flirt with me, I will end our call.
As we are going to the end of this episode, I recommend for all of you listeners to reflect about your core values, your boundaries, the ones that you have, because all of us have some boundaries. Let's think if we may create new boundaries. Maybe we are scared of some reaction of other people to not set the boundaries that we need for our emotional well-being. You may make a list of your boundaries and then reflect after a couple months, a year, how are you keeping up with these boundaries? One situation could be about family celebrations. So if we have family holidays like Christmas, Easter, and so on, quite a lot of people feel obligated to spend the time with family, even though after that time they may feel more emotionally drained, not rested at all, that it was not a holiday, and so on. We could set up a boundary that just part of celebrations we are together, and we may not want to be in all of them. If there is some difficulty in relationship, we may try to set boundaries about communicating and change the relationship dynamic in our family.
Oh, that's really hard. When I think of my family, I can recognize how each other are pushing each other's boundaries. We were talking about how people are crossing their boundaries, but I think only from family gatherings, from these uncomfortable questions. When are you having kids? Or, oh, you gain some weight, oh, you lose some weight. I think it's so many examples why we lose this battery and want to limit the time that we're spending. And we can find the mental boundaries crossed when someone is enforcing their opinions, or asking you to do this or that. I thought of some occasions where it could be in volunteers' life, that it's good to have clear boundaries when you're starting to work. What is your obligations? What is your work? And not overdo something that is out of your competencies or requirements that you agreed on, keeping with this work schedule, not overworking during your free time. Another boundary that I thought, it's with roommates, that there are some... We had an episode about living with others, but I think there are some clear boundaries that can be understood. How much personal space each other needs, what is the cleanness level, and spending time together. Do you want more or do you want less? I think these are the boundaries that are good to figure out and sometimes draw if you feel like it's needed.
Yeah, like for this evening, I want to have personal space and don't interrupt me.
I think I would like to finish with a similar thing I started. It's about inner compass. I'm trying to listen to myself, and where do I feel like I'm rejecting it, I want to get away, or whether I want to engage more. What is suitable for you, what is not suitable for you. And when we are not listening to ourselves for longer, I think our compass might be blurred and it's hard to understand. Then I think it's really important for reflection, to understand the values, understand our needs, or just sometimes seeing examples where other people draw the line and how they are treated. Listen to your inner compass, and I want to just wish you and encourage you to draw the boundaries where it's needed.
I totally agree with you, Gabriela. It's very important to set a boundary and to keep it that way if we feel that it's still important to us, as prioritizing our emotional well-being isn't a luxury. It's the foundation for a fulfilling life. And just like a strong tree needs healthy roots, we need to take care of ourselves to truly flourish. Thank you, listeners. See you in the next episodes.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.